right, I'm John Krysinsky here in the Pittsburgh Sports Live studio. And this is a real exciting time to be a soccer fan in Pittsburgh, so why not a better day to have the second edition of the Soccer Show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. And it's just such an exciting time. So obviously, if you don't already know, the Pittsburgh Riverhounds are on the verge of playing their first ever home playoff game at Highmark Stadium this week, coming up on Saturday. So if you haven't gotten your tickets, I think you better get them now, because ticket sales are they're very close to a sellout at this point. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Pittsburgh Riverhounds, but also it's a monumental week too, because the WPIAL playoff brackets were announced earlier this week as well. And for my website, Pittsburgh Soccer Now, which is part of obviously the Pittsburgh Sports Now family of networks, we have been spending a lot of time in the past couple of months just covering some featured high school games, but also keeping up with the scoreboards and posting all the information and news as it comes in. So it's been just a whirlwind of a week for sure. The playoff brackets were announced in the WPIAL on Wednesday, yesterday, as we are shooting this here on Thursday night. So we'll get to that as well. So just like I said, pretty monumental week. Of course, we're covering the college game as well, as the college teams are heading down the stretch of their season. So some teams are still in contention for playoff berths in different college ranks, especially in the Division I level. We follow pretty closely on Pittsburgh Soccer Now. But let's just get right to it. I mean, the Pittsburgh Riverhounds wrapped up the season on Sunday, losing only for the fifth time this year against the New York Red Bulls 2, kind of a nemesis rival for them over the past 3 or 4 years. The Red Bulls 2 were a little bit more in desperation mode. They wanted to move up and play for a fifth place spot, where the Riverhounds were already kind of set in that third place position. So they kind of, you may want to say, they could have stumbled down the stretch a bit, tying their previous 2 games before that against FC Cincinnati and then Atlanta United 2, and then this Sunday finishing up the regular season with a loss in New Jersey against the New York Red Bulls 2. So what that does, it sets the stage for the playoffs, and the Riverhounds are a number 3 seed. They'll take on the Bethlehem Steel. The affiliate club of the Philadelphia Union, and they have been. This is the 3rd year the Riverhounds and the Steel have played, and it's been a pretty competitive series. But this year the Riverhounds have taken both games. They won at Steel. They had won at Bethlehem. And then about a month ago at Highmark Stadium, they had a really impressive 4-1 victory over Steel FC. So we'll see where they go. It's going to be a very exciting game. Like I said, almost a sellout. But I wanted to touch on a couple things. This is a milestone. Week for the Riverhounds, because it will be the first playoff game, as I mentioned, at Highmark Stadium. Highmark Stadium was built in 2013, and we've seen some riveting, exciting games over the years. If you're in those Pittsburgh soccer circles, like myself, obviously, but those of us around have seen some pretty exciting games at the facility in the 6 years that the stadium's been open. But we've seen an international friendly when Wigan came, English team, professional team Wigan, who at the time were the FA Cup champs. So it was a pretty cool thing to have them here in 2013. That game was played before a sellout crowd, before a standing room only crowd. And then within the first few minutes of the match, within the first couple minutes, Jose Angulo ripped a shot from way out, from about 25, 30 yards out, and just knocked in the goal. And Highmark Stadium went nuts, went bananas. It was a very exciting moment. Of course, Wigan came back to score 3 or 4 goals. I think the quote from Justin Evans, the Riverhounds coach at the time, was, we were hoping for another weather delay at that point, but they didn't get it, obviously. But it was a friendly, and it was an awesome atmosphere, and that's the kind of thing that it's really been lacking the last 6 years, with a few exceptions. So that was one. Another was in 2015, when the Riverhounds had a pretty nice resurgent season. They took on DC United in the Open Cup, U.S. Open Cup, which is an amateur competition, which is open to all amateurs and professionals, Open Cup competition among all U.S. soccer clubs. And the Riverhounds advanced to the 4th round that year and had a chance to host DC United. That was an exciting game, went to double overtime as well. They did lose 3-1, but again, it was one of those matches where for 120 minutes, it was one of those rare moments at a Riverhounds game in the last 6 years here in Pittsburgh where the crowd was hanging on every single touch, and it was super, super exciting. And that's kind of what we're hoping for on Saturday. I think everybody that's in the circles and within our community that's loves the game, loves soccer, is hoping that this is the type of atmosphere it's going to be, maybe even amped up even more. The Riverhounds are going to have a gold out, so they're giving out towels to all the fans, gold towels. They're also giving out 2,000 T-shirts sponsored by Heineken, I believe. So it's only those 21 and older can get a T-shirt, but they're ramping things up. And of course, the other big news this week from those type of logistical kind of things is that earlier in the year they were required to have the capacity of Highmark Stadium needed to go up to 5,000 for them to be at the second division professional club. And lo and behold, about a week or so ago, those additional seating, which will be located in the Paul Child stand, which is on the south end of the stadium. Actually, I'm sorry, the east end of the stadium, have been put in. So there's more seating, which means like I said, there's more tickets available. More tickets became available last week, and they are close to being a sellout. So there's just so much excitement surrounding this game that I just wanted to make sure I spend a little bit of time tonight talking about it. If you get a chance to, you can check out Pittsburgh Soccer Now. I had done a piece on the Riverhounds' history in Highmark Stadium. It was done about a year ago, so it highlighted the first 5 seasons on the Mon, as it was titled in the article, some of the most memorable moments. So I touched on some of those. So be sure to check that out when you get a chance. And of course, Highmark Stadium has been home to other exciting, obviously there's been some football games played there, both high school, women's, professional, with the Passion, and some other different events too have been held at Highmark Stadium. But this is there's even been college teams. Point Park and Carlo, I know, play home games there. And Point Park's men's soccer program clinched their conference title there a couple years ago. So there's been some exciting moments at Highmark Stadium. But this is, the way I compare it, I really look at it almost to the effect that, like the Pirates went 20 years without even being in the playoffs, and then having that opportunity to host that playoff game in 2013 at PNC Park. I'm sure Pittsburgh sports fans remember that day and remember so much about what happened and how special it was. And I think that it would be awesome if the Riverhounds can capture a very similar energy at Highmark Stadium this Saturday. I think that would be just a great boost for that franchise to have an exciting playoff game. And it also a milestone. It's the 100th game at Highmark Stadium as well. So there's just a lot of excitement, but really a lot of the credit, the reason for this is because this year they went out in the offseason and hired Bob Lilly to be the head coach. Bob Lilly is no stranger to postseason play at this level in professional soccer, and he's won 2 professional championships at this level. He's won with the Rochester Rhinos as well as in Vancouver for the Whitecaps as well. So his pedigree speaks for itself, his track record in the playoffs, and I think that's the one place where all the players are turning to and looking at. He's going to set the tone. He knows what to expect. And one of the things this week we've noticed in practice, after really a grueling 34-game grind of a schedule, Bob took the foot off the gas a little bit this week. They trained Tuesday, they trained Wednesday, but they took Thursday off, and then they'll have another light training session on Friday. So the idea is, let's get these guys rested. He talked after the New York Red Bulls loss about, when the playoffs start, it's about, turning things up a notch and playing at a different gear, a different level. We've often heard about that a lot in sports. We hear that, especially like the NFL playoffs start. The intensity of the games just get ramped up to a whole different level. We see that in the NHL playoffs, and we see that in the NBA playoffs, and it gets to that next level. And I think he's going to demand that from this group, is that they take their game to another level. And with wing players like Cristiano Francois and Jordan Dover, guys that can really have the athleticism, the speed, the pace, Romeo Parks. I think he's going to be demanding of all of those guys to just don't take a single minute off. I think that's something that, that's what playoff or single elimination type soccer games, which is a little bit foreign unless you're playing in cup competitions, foreign to international, a lot of the domestic leagues overseas. But here in the United States, our soccer leagues, the MLS and even the USL, go with the full playoff format. So it's, in our eyes, it's pretty exciting. I can't wait to see what happens. I think it's very fitting that this has been a turnaround season, and they'll be playing a cross-state rival in this playoff game, the Bethlehem Steel FC. So that's definitely something to look for. Steel FC, a solid team, no doubt about it. They ended up finishing in 6th place. They got a win on their last game of the week on Sunday as well against Tampa Bay Rowdies. So they got in at the 50-point mark, so they are in 6th place. And so this is a matchup where the Bethlehem Steel, a lot of Philly Union connections, a lot of the players are contracted. They only have 1 or 2 players who are strictly contracted to their USL teams. Their captain, James Chambers, is the one who is really pretty much the steady main force. I think I heard something earlier today citing that from one of the Steel writers, said that they've played 100 games in USL now in 3 years, and they've had 98 different starting 11s. So that will tell you a little bit about how deep and their roster is, how much they tap into their MLS roster, and how often that they're constantly changing. So kind of a tribute to them, though, that they can do that and be successful at the USL level. Because one thing we see a lot of at the USL level are teams that don't quite those MLS 2 teams that are just, they're kind of under the cusp. They just sort of go through the motions. It's all about development. But the 2 teams, the 2 franchises, the Red Bulls 2 and Bethlehem Steel in the Eastern Conference have made the playoffs every year that they've been here, except for 2015 when Steel didn't make the playoffs. So, but these are teams with legitimate deep rosters that could put out a starting 11 that could beat anybody on any given day. So very exciting stuff. So the Riverhounds have that challenge in front of them. A lot of the hype coming in with Bob Lilly was that he was a defensive-minded coach. But if you look at the way the Riverhounds have played in the past, really the second half of the season, especially a lot of games at home, they've been coming out on the attack and playing very forward attacking-minded football, or soccer as we would say. So that's something that I think we're going to be on the lookout for it. You could say maybe the Riverhounds are good when they kind of sit back a little bit, kind of see how the game goes, and then get into counterattacking. Their starting lineup from this past Sunday, I think it looked very much, even though they were playing a game that they didn't have to win, it very much looked like the starting 11 that we'll probably see on Saturday. And that featured Nico Brett up top at forward. You had Romeo Parks, of course, on one of the wings, and you had Kenardo Forbes and Ben Zemansky in the middle. So kind of Rome in the middle. Ben Zemansky taking a deeper holding midfield role, whereas Mohamed Dabo had played that role quite a bit this season. And really has done an excellent job. Maybe a little bit more of a scrappier midfielder that's going to win balls and get the ball back out and redistribute it and get it, the ball to the talented, skilled midfielders like Forbes and Zemansky. Also, in addition, you got Jordan Dover on one wing. You have Ray Lee on the other. That's kind of how the Riverhounds came out this past Sunday. As well, and then the back line, they went with three, and they went with Hugh Roberts and Joe Greenspan, as well as Thomas Vankiazil, who's played just about every position we can think of this year, except maybe striker, forward, and obviously goalkeeper. So Vankiazil's shown incredible versatility. He's broke the team record for season minutes played, and he's just a rookie who won a national championship at the collegiate Division II level last year, so at the University of Charleston. So this is a team, the Riverhounds have a lot of experienced players at this level. Bob Lilly, of course, brought 7 players with him from Rochester. Rochester was a perennial playoff team a year ago, so over the years under Lilly. So he's got players that have some experience. Obviously, Kenardo Forbes is the guy in the middle who I think the Riverhounds will really turn to in these big moments. He's been taking all the penalty kicks of late. And has done well up until Sunday. And Sunday, when they created he had a beautiful through ball attempt to Jordan Dover in the box. Dover got fouled, created a PK opportunity for the Riverhounds to tie the match with the Red Bulls too. And Forbes was he put it on frame, but it was a nice save by the keeper. So it's something to look out for. Obviously, now that we get into the playoffs, these games cannot end in a draw, obviously. So the Riverhounds, hopefully they're practicing PKs. That mental toughness that comes with that is going to be important. So, under Lilly, his teams are usually prepared for difficult situations and to grind out wins, and that's what the playoffs are all about. So that's to kind of give you a brief preview. I think the last time these two teams played, it was a 4-1 match. It was another one of those matches where the Riverhounds just seemed to outwill their opponent, wear an opponent down, and then just pick them apart towards the end of the match and kind of took over in the second half. If you're a Riverhounds fan and you're looking at the playoff game, that's the formula. That's the formula you want to see. You want to bottle those teams up that maybe want to get on the attack. You want to make them chase the game a little bit. I think that's going to be the goal, although I do think that Lilly and his coaching staff will probably would like to see how things go in the first 20 minutes or so. I think there'll be a little bit of maybe, I don't think they'll sit back by no means. Being at home, I think they will come out on the front foot and they will take it to Bethlehem Steel. But I also think that that second or third or fourth gear will come into play as the game goes along, and the Riverhounds will push forward. So before I kind of wrap up some comments about the Riverhounds, I just wanted to say a couple more things. This has been a long time coming with this playoff game, and I think one group in particular that comes to mind that I know just deserves this is the Steel Army, the Riverhounds loyal supporters group. Over the years, there's been some rough seasons. Obviously 2013 and 15 were good seasons, but But 2014 and 16 and 17 were rough years. But you could see even in games late in seasons when there was no chance for playoffs, there was still the packed group there in the Paul Child stand, and the drums were pounding, the chants were going. They've helped begin to create the soccer culture here in Pittsburgh. There's definitely a ways to go. There's definitely more members that they would love to have on board. But when you step foot in a Highmark Stadium, and I think that we'll see that on Saturday, it's the Steel Army that will take the lead. They are going to be the ones to get the chants going and doing all that stuff. And it's just, I think hopefully all the fans that are sitting in the grandstand will follow along and get into it just as much as the Steel Army, and that could make for a very, very special evening. So again, like I said, I ran through a couple of the players. If I'm Bob Lilly and I'm walking into the locker room and it's 15 minutes right after warm-ups are done, and it's 15 minutes before they kick off, I think there's a sense of professionalism in that locker room. I think there's a sense that oftentimes there's probably not much needs to be said in those moments, but still, I think he looks down at his roster and he looks at guys and he's going to say, I'll just go through some of the key players of the season, maybe some of the things he might want to say. His young defenders, Toby Adewale, who's had a second year player for the Riverhounds. Toby might be starting in that moment. He might be coming off the bench in a defensive moment, and he's going to be pushing for those guys to win every single duel. He's got Jordan Dover and Ray Lee kind of on the flanks, but they also got to tuck back and play defense. Be active. Again, win every ball and own the flanks and I think if they're going to be looking to get forward, I think he wants those guys to be instrumental in the attack. Of course, in the middle, he's got Joe Greenspan. He's going to tell Big Joe that, you command the middle. Command the middle. That's what we need you to do. And then you're looking at Hugh Roberts, an experienced pro, again, who was sitting in the studio last couple weeks ago. And Hugh has a great, he's been down this road. He played I think it's his 5th year in the USL, and he's been in playoff moments as well, and he's hungry for this moment. And again, I think the Riverhounds are going to lean on the experience of a Hugh Roberts. In these moments, and then of course, again, out on the width, getting forward is Cristiano Francois. He's got to do his thing. He's got to cause havoc. He's got to disrupt passing lanes when the Hounds are pressing high, and of course, get into those open spaces, take defenders. And do what he does best, and that's just get in and around the box and create havoc. Nico Brett, all year he has been so clinical, and it's again he been playing up top at that top man role. Win balls, keep balls, and also when he has those moments to finish, to turn and make those opportunities count, because everyone will in the playoffs. And then there's Kevin Kerr. I haven't mentioned him, and he didn't start. He has been out with an injury. But the venerable Riverhound midfielder, I still believe if the Riverhounds go on a deep run in the playoffs, Kevin Kerr will have a role. Kevin Kerr will be involved. Even if it means his fitness is not up to a 90-minute level right now, he can have a key role off the bench. And then, of course, there's the one player who I think has just been, I said at the beginning of the year, will probably be the most fascinating player to see how he develops under Bob Lilly, and that's Romeo Parks. I think he'll probably be starting most games. He's just so dangerous out, and the other day he had a play where he got out into open space, took one touch, accelerated past 2 defenders, got into the box. The keeper made a nice play to deny a shot, but that's the type of thing that Romeo Parks brings to the table, so they definitely need that from him. And then, again, I mentioned Zemanski and Forbes in the middle. I think those guys, the talent, the experience, the calmness on the ball, the ability to get the ball to where it needs to go. I think those two are going to set the tone really for this team in the middle of the field. I think that's really the key. You've got guys like Mohamed Dabo, who could either start in that holding midfield role or come in late in the game. I think he's going to be used in different ways as the playoffs go on. There's depth. There's depth at defense. You got Todd Pratzner, as I mentioned already, Toby Adewale. So this team, I think, has the depth to go and win 4 games and win a USL Cup. Their coach believes it. He's trying to instill that in his players that they have to believe it. I think there's a certain sense of confidence that they believe it. So we will just wait and see what happens on Saturday. So I read we have on Pittsburgh Soccer Now, we have coverage all week long. We've had somebody at training every day, which is great. Matt Geika, Mark Goodman have been there the past few days. Our photographer, Ed Thompson's been out there as well. So be sure to check out all the Riverhounds coverage on Pittsburgh Soccer Now. So we're very, very excited about this game on Saturday. And who knows, hopefully it means the beginning of a playoff run, and we'll have all the coverage on Pittsburgh Soccer Now. We're very, very excited about that, as you can grasp from my little spiel here. So I'm ready to transition and move into the WPIAL playoffs. And honestly, I'd like to kind of narrow this down into as short amount of time as possible. So we're going to do the best we can. We're going to do a quick rundown of all the different brackets and then see kind of where we can go. Obviously, the place to start will be at the boys level. As you can check out all the brackets on Pittsburgh Soccer Now. You just go to the site, check it out. We have every single classification, all the brackets listed there. The playoffs will begin on Saturday. The girls will start their first round Saturday. The boys will start their first round on Monday, and then we'll get into the quarterfinals, semifinals, and then the finals will be at Highmark Stadium, November 1st through the 3rd. And again, Pittsburgh Soccer Now will have as much coverage as possible. There'll be scoreboards posted every night on our website after the action. Be sure to check out, see who won games and whatever. We are also relying on some contributors to provide reports throughout each night. So, all right, let's get right to it. Boys 4A. This is a classification that has seen North Allegheny win the last 2 years. The first 2 years there was a 4A classification before we went to the three class system. So now with 4 classifications, North Allegheny, and both times they were trailing late at the end of the second half in the championship games, came back and won miraculously. So it'll be very interesting. They snuck into the playoffs. They had a tie in the last game of the season against Butler to sneak in. So the teams that we're looking at potentially as the top seeds in the boys 4A, Seneca Valley won that section where North Allegheny is. They won Section 1 in Class 4A. So right now they're sitting at the top seed, but it's going to be wide open. 4A has been wide open basically every year for the most part since the dominance of Upper St. Clair and Peters Township. But now that the teams that Norwin has really risen up this year, they're going to be a strong team. They won their section, undefeated in their section as well. And then, as I mentioned, Seneca Valley as well is going to be a team to watch out for in 4A. Like I said, Norwin Knights, I mean, Carter Breen was tearing up the record books as far as his school and scoring. He scored 33 goals this year. So look for maybe Carter Breen, who is, by the way, Pittsburgh Soccer Now's Player of the Week this week as well. So that's the teams really to look for. There's maybe a sleeper here or there. At 4A, it's basically any team can beat any team on any given night, and that's kind of how I see this going. Like I said, the Upper St. Clair even though they took their section too, that's the same section with Peters Township, and now Cannon McMillan's won 5 straight games, even knocking off Upper St. Clair. Didn't win the section, but that's a team also to watch out for. Coach Larry Fingers, I know him well. I coached him way back in the day. And he played for me at Point Park, and And I sat there and watched Cannon McMillan beat Fox Chapel the last time they won the WPIAL championship. And again, a miraculous finish. They were down 1-0 late. Got a penalty kick with less than 2 minutes left, and then got the overtime goal in the 2015 final. Not exactly the favorite final in the Krysinsky household, obviously, as my son was a senior starter for Fox Chapel that year. So we remember that one pretty well. All right, so we're going to move on to 3A. So boys 3A, this has been quite a year. Franklin Regional dropped down into 3A this year. We didn't know what to expect, and they have been pretty dominant. They've only given up 3 goals in all competition this year, posted 12 shutouts, and they look real strong. But, you know, going into the season, West Allegheny was kind of touted as really the co-favorite as well, and they really haven't disappointed. I mean, they have 1 loss to Blackhawk, but really, other than that, they've been dominant, pretty dominant. We had them for Pittsburgh Soccer Now feature game as well, and they came away with a 1-0 win. We saw them beat South Fayette, one of their regional rivals from that in AAA. So those are the 2 teams I would think we probably will see in the final. You know, but there's some other teams lurking. Moon has got a really solid squad this year. They posted 10 shutouts. And I can't forget some other teams. You know, you got Mars, too. Mars has been a perennial, another section championship for Mars this year. They're always right up there. So that's a team to watch out for as well. So that's 3A. Again, Nate Dragicic is the featured player for West Allegheny. He has signed, committed to Duquesne, so we'll be watching Nathan closely as well. I think he had 31 goals and 14 assists for Nathan this year, so impressive season for him. All right, so 2A, boys. I'll skim through this. This is a wild final last year, an unforgettable final. How can you ever forget a final at Highmark Stadium between a heavy favorite, basically, in Quaker Valley, and the underdog 15 seed Shadyside Academy, and somehow, even with Quaker leading late in that game, Shadyside not only tied the game on a bicycle kick goal, but from a long throw-in, but then in overtime, pretty much replicated that same feat on a long throw-in, a bicycle attempt, but then it was eventually headed in. Just an incredible game. We have all that on Pittsburgh Soccer Now in our archives. You can check all that out. But this year, Quaker Valley has been steamrolling through everybody in 2A. And this is a team that I think will be very, very, very hard to beat. Last year, after that loss to Shadyside Academy, they rolled through the PIAA playoffs under the coaching of Andrew Marshall, a former Riverhound, and he's back at it this year. This year, they are they've outscored their opponents 101-3 in their final 14 games. They played they stepped up in competition early in the season, played out of state even one game, lost a couple games early against really good competition, but since at the 2A level have been completely dominant, and that was even against North Catholic, who won the 1A and stepped up to 2A this year, and both times Quaker Valley handled North Catholic with no problem. But there's been a couple other really good teams in 2A this year. We saw Deer Lakes as our featured game. We saw them beat Freeport 7-0 last week with Pittsburgh Soccer Now coverage and a Facebook Live broadcast with Matt Geika. That was an impressive-looking team, Deer Lakes, and so they're undefeated in section. The only blemish on their schedule was a tie to Shadyside Academy in their section. So very, very good Deer Lakes team. Shadyside is still there. They've done it before. Why not again, right? And they really haven't lost that many players from their WPIAL championship team last year. So look for those teams. I don't want to ignore Keystone Oaks either. They finished their season unbeaten in their section, outscoring their opponent 75-4. So I was talking to Deer Lakes coach Jordan Wigan after that game, and he said, we just don't know some of these other teams in the other sections, how things are going to shape up. So the Deer Lakes, Keystone Oaks, teams like that, could still be a factor in challenging Quaker. But right now, it's Quaker Valley that's the team to beat in 1A boys. All right, so we're going to skim through here. Class A this year. Normally, Class A, you could look and say like Seton LaSalle, Greensburg Central Catholic are top teams. Look out for Avonworth is actually the top seed this year. A lot of people kind of picking Greensburg Central Catholic. They have to get over the hump. They keep losing disappointing first round games. And it seems like every year they lose it at Hampton. They play at Hampton the first round and they lose again, not against Hampton, but at that location as their first round match, and they've lost those first round games. But again, they're coming into the playoffs hot. They've won 12 consecutive games, so they're rolling, and they've got some really good talented players. Luke Mort and Nate Ward are two players to watch out for from Greensburg Central Catholic. So watch those teams that I just mentioned. And there's Riverside was a quarterfinalist in AA last year, and they've dropped down to single A, so they could be a kind of a sneaky sleeper team. All right, so let's jump into girls. I'm going to try to scan through. So girls Quad A. In the past few years, you could say it was Norwin, and then they had one challenger. 1 year it was Upper St. Clair. The next year, they were challenged a bit by Cannon Mac, the Cannon Mac team with current Pitt player Aideen O'Donoghue. And then last year, it was their neighboring rivals, Penn Trafford. So Norwin won consecutive WPIAL titles, and then last year lost it to Penn Trafford. Of course, a lot of these schools have lost a lot of key players, but they've reloaded. But the team this year that's kind of risen above all of them is Seneca Valley. So both on the boys and the girls side in Quad A, you've got Seneca Valley there. They haven't won. They've won, and they've been there. The girls side on Seneca Valley, they've won titles in 2007. They've won in 2009, 13, and of course 2014. So they won it again. That Section 1 is tough on the girls side as well. So look for them to be the kind of the team that people are going to be looking to knock off. But I would never ever discount Norwin. They've got the coaching staff that have been there. They've got players who were understudies for that really great group that came through. A lot of seniors last year, but they still have 3 Pitt recruits on that roster. So Aaron Frankovich, Caitlin Kaufman, and Lacey Burnick. Those are 3 Pitt recruits that are playing for Norwin right now. They're just loaded with talent. They always have a lot of athleticism, and they really can push teams to the limit. Watch out for Peters Township as well. They are a 3 seed, and another team that I think will get far. We'll see what they can do in a semifinal. Potential semifinal matchup with Norwin would be good. So all those games I think will be really good. So I have a feeling it's going to be Norwin again. I think that they'll be there. Seneca Valley, they've got the history, and I think they can make it back as well. All right, so AAA girls, we'll just go right to the last year. Moon owned AAA for 2 or 3 years. Delaney Snyder was such an outstanding player. She set the tone, but the roster, the depth that they had. But they moved up to 4A this year. So they're in the mix in the middle of the pack in 4A. They're in the playoffs, but they've got they're in a little bit. And they're not quite the team they were a year ago, but they don't have the talents of a Delaney Snyder, but they're still in the mix in 4A. But in 3A, the team that took Moon to the limit, Moon rolled through, won PIAL. They won the PIAA both in 2016 and 17. But the one team that gave them fits last year was a young Mars team. And guess what? That young Mars team this year is undefeated. They have rolled through competition. They're actually nationally ranked right now. And so that AAA Mars team, they're 15-0. Coach Blair Gerlich does an incredible job with that group. And they are undefeated. They're going to be the heavy favorite. We've had some great seasons though by some other section champions. Oakland Catholic's going to be the number 2 seed, and just like Greensburg Central Catholic boys, they have this first round. If they can get past that first round this year, they can get over the hump. They've lost 4 straight years in the first round. So if they can get over the hump, they could be a team that could really threaten as well. So Hanahan was our from Oakland Catholic was our Player of the Week for the WPIAL Adidas Player of the Week this week as well. So she has 22 goals for the season and is a player to watch out for with Oakland Catholic. Other teams are going to have to really be on the lookout for as well. So, there's a lot of competition out there, but really I think it's a two-dog race in 3A at this point. I think it's Marist and Oakland Catholic. I think that's going to be kind of where AAA probably ends up. There's another really good team in Bell Vernon out there too as well. So, again, just watch out. You're going to see some good competition all the way around in girls AAA as well. And then finally, the last two classifications, you got girls AA and girls single A. They haven't won a section. They haven't won a WPIAL in a long time, but they've always been up there, and that's South Park. With Freedom dropping down to single A, and some of the other teams in the recent years that have Waynesburg, for example, last year had a tremendous season, finished and won the whole thing. I think South Park's going to be that team. They've been the top seed, and they'll probably be. I think they've won 22 consecutive section titles. And only lost 10 sections. So we know they can do it in section. They've reached the semifinals just about every time in the past 20 years. So this is this is their year to really reclaim AA. And I think, there'll be some challenges. You've got Hopewell out there. You got that. Like I said, Waynesburg can still score goals. They certainly did. Maddie Clayton last year moved on to play for Pitt, but they've still got some excellent players. There's some tough-nosed teams out there, as I mentioned, Hopewell, but also Yock. Watch out for Yock as well. Junior Justine Apollona is a pretty good goal scorer as well, so for Yock. So just watch out for them. And then finally, this is, to me, one of the most fascinating things that classes that we'll be looking at is Class A girls. As I mentioned, Freedom has dropped down. They won AA 2 years ago in 2016, and now they've dropped down to single A, and they have, obviously, can they break up the party that's been only a two-team race since single A has existed, since 2010 when single A girls started? It's either been Greensburg Central Catholic or Shadyside Academy, and those two teams every year seems like they play 3 or 4 times. They play in the regular season twice, then they play in the WPIAL, then they play in the PIAA. So can Freedom kind of rock the boat a little bit? They are a really great team, a really good team. Have a lot of talent. Mila Sharpless, she's returned from injury, and her freshman sister this year scored. Jaden Sharpless scored 50 goals this year, so they just keep bringing the talent. But Mila's she's committed to Florida Atlantic, a pretty good program there. But you just can't put anything past Greensburg Central Catholic and Shadyside Academy. They both have won championships. Again, last year they split it. It was Greensburg Central Catholic who won the WPIAL, Shadyside who won the PIAAs for the first time in their history. So look, and obviously Christina Reitel for Shadyside Academy. We've watched her grow since her freshman year, scoring more than 100 goals. And she's really a playmaker, a midfielder, and a player in the middle that really makes things happen. So I think it's going to be great. The single A, I think you're going to see you got 3 real high quality teams, as well as maybe potentially a team like Seton LaSalle that can maybe make some noise as well. So that's it. In a wrap, I've got all the WPIAL brackets kind of covered. I scanned through that. Hopefully I did it in a good amount of time, and gave you just enough information that gets you excited about watching or getting out to all the fields around Western Pennsylvania. Again, starting Saturday, the girls. Then Monday, the boys start their first round, and then it'll click into the quarterfinals next week, semifinals towards the end of next week into early the following week, and then Highmark Stadium, November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. We'll see. We'll see what happens if the Riverhounds would somehow miraculously could potentially end up hosting more home playoff games. I mean, it's possible. FC Cincinnati would have to lose. Louisville City would have to lose. But if that's the case, wonder what that schedule will look like at Highmark Stadium that weekend of November 1 through 3. So that's a good question for our friends with the Riverhounds, and a good question, a good problem to have, I think, if you ask me or if you ask anybody that follows soccer around this area. So, all right. Well, I wanted to thank you for tuning in and watching this on Pittsburgh Sports Live. This is the soccer show. We plan to have future shows. We'll see how it goes in the coming weeks with the playoffs, with the Riverhounds, and other developments. Is obviously the WPIAL, the PIAAs, and all the other exciting things that are happening. We'll see if the Pitt men's soccer team or if the Duquesne women's soccer team or some of the other college teams can make some noise as well in these final few weeks of the regular season for them as well. So as you can tell, I am excited about all of this in soccer in our region. And again, thanks for tuning in to watch this show, and obviously for all things related to Pittsburgh soccer. Be sure to check out PittsburghSoccerNow.com. We've got all the Riverhounds. We got all the coverage for all the teams in high schools and college and everything else. We even have covering the youth area as well. So there's a lot of different topics we cover regarding soccer. So again, thanks for joining me. It's been fun, and who knows, maybe even next time I'll have a guest here, somebody that we can kind of go back and forth and talk some fun things with regarding Pittsburgh soccer. So again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.